If you would like to be a part of the program, you are more than welcome to call in. You can also connect with us at ewerickson.com or ericericksonshow.com, whichever you prefer. Remember, new recipes go out every Wednesday, so one comes tomorrow. I don't know which one it is, but you can text the word recipe to 33777 in order to be on the list. Fill it out. You go check out the website, all of that. We must speak. Well, first, I got to tell you guys what happened. Poor Jim nearly had to run a best of show this morning. Your host lost track of time running around his house looking for his cell phone. I could not find my iPhone. I did not have on my watch to be able to ping it. And I knew I had it somewhere in the house. And I mean, how hard can it be to find your freaking phone? Well, it was more difficult than it should have been. Y'all, it is only, I am months away from Geritol and Depends. I guess I've hit that age. Old people smell is coming for me. My phone was in my pocket the entire time. The entire time. I have literally run up and down the stairs. Normally, because, I don't want to bother Christy in the morning, so I'll take my shower and stuff in the guest bedroom, but I moved everything back to our bedroom and decided I would shower in there because she was up early she's in the school routine now. And well, is it upstairs? Is it downstairs? Where is it? It was in my pocket the entire freaking time. I had hit that age. Your host nearly missed his own radio show because he couldn't find his phone that was in his pocket. I'm sorry. Y'all may well be ready for me. I can't let this go. And like my nearsightedness, I was driving down the road the other day. It's like I couldn't see like the lotto billboard. You see them everywhere, and I couldn't see the lottery billboard. I couldn't see any of the billboard. Not that I play the lottery, but that's kind of the benchmark. If I can see that one from when I come over the hill by Tom Hill Sr. in Macon, and I can see down the road, and suddenly it's going foggy, it's going blurry. I got to get my eyes. I'm falling apart here. I'm falling apart. That's all right though. We got to move on now. There is breaking news this morning. The terrorist group Boko Haram has claimed another victim in the United States. Boko Haram targeted another person in Hollywood. This person's name is Chris Harrison. You might have heard of him. Chris Harrison, his life now destroyed by the terrorist group Boko Haram, even though he apologized for not understanding the gravity of the situation and daring to ask that people extend grace to someone else by daring to suggest that people should extend grace to a white woman. Boko Haram has eliminated Chris Harrison. Boko Haram spokesperson Don Lemon.
I don't know if these apologies are sincere or what have you. All right, Rachel did what Rachel did. You haven't interviewed her, right, but you interviewed Chris. Yeah. Chris has been on this earth for 5 decades. He's 49 years old, and he hasn't had to deal with these issues. He hasn't taken the opportunity or the chance in almost 50 years, especially doing what he does in the history of this show, to learn about racism in America. That's actually the definition of privilege.
There you go. Because he wanted grace for someone, he was too white, too privileged. Boko Haram must eliminate him. I reached out to Boko Haram tribal leader Chief Talawaki, and they were doing something with Brazilians and nuts. I don't know. So there's no more comment coming from Boko Haram this morning. They've taken out another American. Boko Haram taking credit through their spokesperson Don Lemon on CNN. Now, what is this going on here? Well, I don't even watch The Bachelor. Chris Harrison is the host of The Bachelor. He's having to temporarily step aside. This season, there is a young lady on the show. Her name is Rachel Kirkconnell. And Rachel Kirkconnell, in 2018, while in college, attended a sorority party. that was Old South plantation themed. I assume it was the KA fraternity party that she went to. I don't know. But Rachel Kirkconnell went to a Old South themed, with antebellum dresses and on and it's even more relevant. I'm sorry. See, I don't watch the show. She went to Georgia College in Milledgeville. So it would be natural for Rachel Kirkconnell to have gone to an Old South themed party at a fraternity or sorority, a Greek organization. It would have been totally natural for her to do that. Oh, she's a graphic designer too. I'm just like 24 years old, graphic designer, went to Georgia College. So it would be totally natural for Rachel Kirkconnell in 2018 at Georgia College in Milledgeville to go to an Old South themed sorority party. I bet you millions of people have done so in the last decade. In the last couple of years, I bet you thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands have done so. Well, the pictures came out on her social media feed, and Rachel Lindsay, a different Rachel, is an extra correspondent and former star of The Bachelorette, and raised the issue with Chris Harrison about Rachel Kirkconnell going to an Old South themed plantation. Let me read you what this is Chris Harrison. I saw a picture of her at a sorority party 5 years ago, and that's it. Like, boom. I'm like, really? And the extra correspondent replies, the picture was from 2018 at an Old South antebellum party. That's not a good look. And Harrison replies, is it a good look in 2018 or is it not a good look in 2021? Because there's a big difference. The extra correspondent, clearly offended by it, says it's not a good look ever. If I went to that party, what would I represent at that party? And Harrison replies, you're 100% right in 2021. That's not the case in 2018. And again, I'm not defending Rachel Kirkconnell. I just know that, 50 million people did that in 2018. That was a type of party that a lot of people went to. And again, I'm not defending it. I didn't go to it. I'm not defending it. I didn't go to it, but he asked for grace and understanding for this girl who went to something that quote, 50 million people did that in 2018. Now listen. This is an issue here. This is what the extra correspondent says. If I went to that party, what would I represent at that party? A party goer. Now, I realize you're supposed to implied old pre-Civil War South, a black lady going to the party wouldn't have gone. Oh, come on, please. It's 2018 at a college. I'm sorry, everybody's offended by this, but I'm listen. Be mad at me. I totally get the implications of the antebellum party, but you cannot deny that a whole lot of people went, and all they were doing was they were going for a good time at a party. You may be upset that it represents the antebellum South. I've never quite understood the infatuation with people hagiographizing or elevating the loser side of the Civil War, but people do. And no one means anything wrong by it. It is part of a culture that you may not like, but is a predominant culture, particularly in the South, on college campuses. You may not like it, but you're going to damn someone for having gone there. Now, this gets into the larger issue. I couldn't care less about Chris Harrison per se, or this young woman who, well, actually, I do kind of care that a college girl goes to a college party. It is on social media, and now we're going back retroactively and ruining her life for something that happened in 2018 when she was a college student. But what bothers me terribly about this is that one, he's got to be punished for daring to say we should show grace to this person. And then two, he issues a fairly groveling apology. Listen to this. While I do not speak for Rachel Kirkconnell, my intentions were simply to ask for grace in offering her an opportunity to speak on her own behalf. What I now realize I have done is cause harm by wrongly speaking in a manner that perpetuates racism, and for that I am deeply sorry. I also apologize to my friend Rachel Lindsay for not listening to her better on a topic that she has a firsthand understanding of, and humbly thank the members of Bachelor Nation who've reached out to me to hold me accountable. I promise to do better. Wait just a minute. What I now realize I have done is cause harm by wrongly speaking in a manner that perpetuates racism. I believe his exact words were, you're 100% right, in 2021, it's not a good look. That was not the case in 2018. So he acknowledges that in current present America, it's bad. You shouldn't do it, but it was a pretty common thing to do in 2018. How does that perpetuate racism to acknowledge that currently it would be an inappropriate thing to go to, but we shouldn't ruin people for doing something 5 years ago that was commonly practiced? Because Boko Haram demands it, and what Boko Haram wants, Boko Haram gets. The terror leaders will not be satiated until anyone of any wrong think is destroyed. Again, the only difference between the Boko Haram and the Woko Haram is the Boko comes for your life, then the Woko comes for your livelihood. They both want to destroy you. One just flatlines your heart. The other just flatlines your career and your livelihood and causes people to make you a social pariah. This leads to violence. It does. I'm sorry. It perturbs and angers people when I point this out. But when the left can disproportionately ruin people's lives over prior acts that were perfectly socially acceptable at the time, even when those people apologize, or ruin someone's life for having the audacity to say, maybe we should have some grace for this person that was 5 years ago. God help that person for doing it. Society can't function this way. People are going to start ratting out their neighbors. They're going to troll through social media from 5 and 6 years ago and find stuff. You want that promotion? Go find the guy you're competing against from 5 years ago. Find the thing he said that Boko Haram won't like and be sure to flag it. They will come for that person. You're going to have neighbor turning on neighbor. This is not sustainable or healthy for society. Who cares that it's The Bachelor or Chris Harrison? He will be fine. I'm sure he's got lots of money in the bank. And by the way, he's temporarily stepping aside to rethink his life. This is ridiculous. The level of cancel culture in America, it disproportionately runs to the left. The left can justify this all they want. Listen again to Boko Haram spokesperson Don Lemon.
I don't know if these apologies are sincere or what have you. All right.
I don't know if they're sincere or what have you. The apology.
Rachel did what Rachel did. You haven't interviewed her, right, but you interviewed Chris. Yeah. Chris has been on this earth for 5 decades. He's 49 years old.
So he hasn't been on the planet for 5 decades. He's been on the planet for 4 decades, 9 years.
And he hasn't had to deal with these issues. He hasn't taken the opportunity or the chance in almost 50 years, especially doing what he does in the history of this show, to learn about racism in America. That's actually the definition of privilege.
How do you know he hasn't taken the time to do that? Because he said 50 million people went to this. We shouldn't ruin a girl's life. How do you know he doesn't understand this stuff? Because of one statement where he says we shouldn't punish a girl for doing something in 2018 that wouldn't be acceptable today, but it was perfectly acceptable back then. I'm sorry. The standards for Boko Haram, eventually they get narrower and narrower, and they come for everybody. The only way to fight them is to not go along with them. People like Chris Harrison should be under obligation to double down. I mean, I don't blame the guy, and I'm sure there was corporate pressure. You know, Disney is like the mouse is like radical jihadi when it comes to Boko Haram now. Have you ever watched the mouse? Like, we don't even let our kids watch the Disney Channel. I mean, half the boys there could be swapped out for girls, and you never know the difference. It's like the Disney Channel is that Nickelodeon or like the hubs for Wokistan indoctrination. The mouse is the lead jihadi for Wokistan now. You got Kathleen Kennedy firing Gina Carano from The Mandalorian for daring not to be woke. Meanwhile, the woke actors get to say Trump supporters should die in wood chippers, and they leave those people alone. The double standard here will cause people to lash out, and that lashing out will ultimately become violent. It is inexcusable that it will, but I can tell you it's going to happen. People are going to be up in arms about this. But here's the other thing. I actually feel very strongly that we do need to deal with racial reconciliation in this country, in the church and elsewhere. I do think we need to acknowledge that in a country that had a civil war over race and then immediately saw people impose Jim Crow and alienated and marginalized minorities, we can't just snap a finger and say all of a sudden, whoa, hey, it's all gone away now. There will always be racist people, but what things in our society have caused generations of particularly Black Americans to be set back? I do think we have to have those conversations, but no one's going to want to have those conversations, and I don't blame them. You say one false thing, they're going to come for you. They're going to ruin your career. This puts any sort of racial reconciliation, just it takes it off the table because you can't have the conversation unless you capitulate. And see, that's the other problem here is the only solution, according to Boko Haram, is absolute capitulation. You've got to convert to wokeism or else you'll be eliminated. There really is fewer and fewer differences other than death between Boko Haram and Boko Haram these days.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 87.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. My father texted during commercial break and said Al Jolson couldn't have a career today. Now, for those of you who don't know, Al Jolson was a singer who was widely known for blackface. So, yes, he could not do that today. Complex legacy, though, with this guy. There's actually a point to me bringing this up as I walk through the landmines of talking about this. Al Jolson was Lithuanian, was an Lithuanian born. He was dubbed at one point the king of blackface. He was also the star of the first motion picture with audio, The Jazz Singer, in 1927. Point here, though, is he helped popularize African American music within white communities that otherwise had refused to embrace black culture. He was able to be a bridge into that. Now, complicated history, of course. You've got now, of course, people attacking him. Here's a quote from, I'm looking in Wikipedia now. If blackface has its shameful poster boy, it is Al Jolson. Yeah, complex legacy, but he's well regarded, again, Wikipedia, well regarded by black publications, and he's been credited for fighting against black discrimination on Broadway. He helped embrace and move the United States into a modern music era, frankly, by embracing blues and jazz, among other things, that had taken wide popularity within the black community and otherwise didn't have a bridge into the white community, particularly in the South where the music dominated, because lack of connections and racial stereotypes and the like. Now, the point here is Al Jolson is buried in San Francisco. When do they dig up his grave and burn his body for his crimes against humanity?
30.
It's only a matter of time. These days, completely unacceptable. Really was unacceptable then, too, if we're honest about it. But, he was a quite famous American who did what he did, is buried in San Francisco,
15.
and it's only a matter of time before the wokes demand that his body be dug up and
10.
thrown out into the sea. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'll spend more time on this in the next hour, but I do want to give you a heads up that David Perdue has filed paperwork with the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, to run again. He's at least exploring another run for office, and that's actually a good thing. In fact, I reached out to his team and said, if I can do anything, let me know. I actually think that he could be potentially unifying for the GOP at a time that the GOP is very divided. And, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because there are rumors that maybe Doug Collins wants to do it. Maybe Kelly Loeffler wants to do it. Part of that is speculation. I think Doug would be fine, but if David wants to go, I think David Perdue should be given the opportunity. But I want to say something. Don't shoot the messenger on this one, please. Part of the problem that Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue had is they were defined, if you will, by their support of Donald Trump. And they made their entire campaign, and I think it was a mistake that they made their campaign about the rise of socialism, you name it. I don't think they should have done that. I think that, let me just give you a story, and this is from Paul Begala. You can discount this all you want because it's from a Democrat, but there's some truth in this. I think you'll see. Ann Richards, I've told this story before. Paul told me this directly. Ann Richards was the governor of Texas, and she lost to George W. Bush in 1994. And she called Bill Clinton in late 1995 and told him he was going to lose the presidency. And the reason he was going to lose the presidency is because he was spending so much time telling people what he had done for them and the bad things the Republicans would do if they got elected, that he never spent any time on what he would do if he was reelected. Say what you will, but there's wisdom in that. What I mean very precisely, very thoughtfully on this, is that David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler ran a tag team match on how awful it would be if Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff got elected. The socialism would win. Now, very honestly, they came super close to winning, and the only reason they didn't win was because Republicans themselves stayed home. Republicans themselves chose not to participate. Republicans lost more so than Democrats won. And I think it is incumbent upon people like Perdue and Loeffler to run again, but make it more about what they want to do as opposed to how bad the other side is. The reason I say that is because as much as there were a lot of Republicans who stayed home because they thought that the race was going to be stolen, there was no way you could win, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, there were people who stayed home, and I've heard from them as well, and John Ossoff only won by about 52,000 votes. There were a lot of people who stayed home because they thought, well, I mean, all these guys are offering is more of Donald Trump. What about themselves? What do they stand for? And I think there were probably enough of those people that had they actually engaged somewhat differently, had they engaged with a message of positivity of what they would do, I think they would have won. Say what you will about Raphael Warnock, but one of the things that people remember about him is that his ads were super, super positive. His puppy ads, among other things. I think that sort of stuff matters. I think that sort of stuff deeply matters. And I think that sort of stuff really does change campaigns. And we didn't get that from them. More on this in the next hour with Perdue and Leffler. And I'm happy to take your phone calls as well. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to talk, though, about what's happening in Texas. The Babylon Bee actually has a very funny piece. The headline is, people who moved to Texas from California finally feeling at home now that power is out. Thousands of people who escaped the desolate wasteland of California found new opportunities by moving to Texas. To help them feel right at home, even the weather is extending some Texas hospitality by knocking out power stations, giving the former Californians a taste of the blackouts they're so used to. Just like old Gavin Newsom used to do back in Cali, said local resident Alice Muggins while lighting candles around the house. I just wasn't used to having electrical power all the time, and it felt really weird. Now it feels a little more like home. Here's a problem in Texas. The wind turbines in Texas, they stopped building coal power and they didn't build nuclear power. They built wind turbines. And the wind turbines have frozen in a once-in-a-lifetime wave of cold. And they're having to use fossil fuel-burning helicopters to drop fossil fuel-based de-icers to break up the windmills so that they'll spin again. And, you know, they could put heaters in them, but the heaters would throw off the cost. But more importantly than that, up north, they've got the heaters, and the heaters are barely working. And in Chicago, the Chicago area, the windmills there are putting out about 5% efficiency. European countries are having the same problem. Don't look to them for solutions. In Sweden, they've had to turn back on oil-burning power plants. Norway is buying power from Poland, which primarily uses fossil fuel coal-burning power plants. France has a lot of nuclear energy, and in Great Britain, power prices have gone through the roof. Put it this way, in Texas, during a massive heat wave during the summer, you're typically talking about $100 a kilowatt hour of power. Yesterday, at one point, it was $9,000 for a kilowatt hour of power. Internet friend of mine was actually dismissed from his office early because of the storm, and got stuck in an elevator in a high-rise in Texas for an hour and a half. Power went out as the elevator was descending. Meanwhile, in Houston, the downtown core has lights on. The suburbs are without power, and people are upset that the downtown area has all of its lights on. And, of course, the media, which is totally into classism these days, is trying to provoke people to attack the big businesses in downtown Houston who have high-rises with buildings on. This is a real problem. We got sustainability issues. There are times the wind doesn't blow, and there are times the sun doesn't shine. And when you replace your power grid that has energy that ramp up is easy, you can't meet demand. You don't meet demand. You won't meet demand. Rick Perry was on television last night talking about natural gas. And, you know, natural gas burns a whole lot cleaner than coal. The problem is that it has emissions. And even though it's super clean, it's not clean enough for the left. You've actually got Bill Gates out there saying we got to get rid of all emissions. This is an actual tweet from Bill Gates. To avoid a climate disaster, we need to eliminate emissions from the ways we create electricity, grow food, make things, move around, and heat and cool our buildings. It won't be easy, but I believe we can do it. Let me read you this tweet from Bill Gates again. To avoid a climate disaster, we need to eliminate emissions from the ways we create electricity, grow food, make things, move around, and heat and cool our buildings. It won't be easy, but I believe we can do it. Oh, and guess what? He has helpfully produced a book about what it will take. A book printed on dead trees. Wonder if he bought carbon offset somewhere to make himself feel good about this. Here's the thing. Natural gas is way cleaner than coal, but natural gas still causes CO2 emissions, so the left doesn't like it. Nuclear is a great way to go, but the left doesn't like nuclear energy. They run scare scenarios. Because really what it comes down to is they don't want an advanced technological Western civilization. They don't want it. He wants us, Bill Gates wants us to eliminate emissions from growing food. He is out saying we need to eat synthetic meat. Synthetic meat, because we need to eliminate the cow. I mean, are we going to cull the herds to eliminate their methane production? Apparently so. Apparently that's the strategy, is moving towards synthetic meat. That we need to use electricity to okay, so we need the battery-powered cars, which also cause water pollution and land pollution when you harvest the rare earth minerals, much of which China controls. This is feel-goodism for a Western billionaire. Africans would love to have air conditioners. If everyone in Africa turned on an air conditioner, the left would freak out in this country because of the emissions from the air conditioners. Essentially, what the modern intellectual elite in the West want is for all of us to be back in poverty globally, because to advance, there are things called emissions. There are companies like Apple that have proved to be highly technological by offsetting its usage in ways that a lot of people can't. If you've got $1 trillion, you get to do this. If you don't, well, our government doesn't have the money to make it happen either. Meanwhile, in Texas, which tried to do good by environmentalists, people are going to freeze to death, literally freeze to death. I've got a buddy of mine, it was 35 degrees in his house last night without power. And he's got an insulated house. They were just out of power the whole time. The ideas just don't work well. The ideas are not good. The ideas sound great when you're a billionaire and have the money and you can put a windmill in your backyard. But to try to get people to, we've still got people who are hungry in this country who would crave a steak, crave a piece of chicken, crave ground beef, and you want them to buy more synthetic, expensive meat. You know, the Impossible Burger? You want people to buy the Impossible Burger, which, by the way, there are emissions caused in the creation of it, I would expect. But also, for years now, nutritionists have been telling us that you've got to eat less. In order to be healthy, you need to eat less processed food. And now the solution for the billionaire elite is for you to eat only the most highly processed synthetic meat, instead of just going out and cutting off a piece of a cow. There will be people going blind in bathrooms in academia reading Bill Gates' book and on news channels across America. I'm sure Boko Haram will be all about this sort of stuff. But real people in the real world with real problems, they just need their lights to come on. And if it's by coal or natural gas or nuclear, let them do it. Turn the lights back on. Right now, what we're seeing as all this stuff comes trotting out is a lot of reasons for people to not take the environmentalists seriously. In Texas, with its own power grid, they can't produce enough power for their people. They've turned into California because instead of building nuclear power plants like the environmentalists were opposed to, the environmentalists wanted windmills. They got the windmills. The windmills are frozen solid, and now they can't produce power for the entire state of Texas. It was only last summer that Ted Cruz was mocking Californians for being without power, and now his own state is, because of environmentalist wackadoos who pushed the state to do something they shouldn't have done.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. Hang on a second, let me get to this piece real quick before I get to the phones. Why Texas has gone dark. This is John Hinderaker at Powerline. Much of Texas is experiencing rolling blackouts as utilities are unable to keep power flowing. Why? Well, more than 2.5 million people in Texas. He's reading, quoting now from AmericanExperiment.org. In Texas are currently experiencing rolling blackouts as temperatures remain in the single digits. The Lone Star State is currently short of electricity because half of the Texas wind fleet, the largest in the nation, is iced over and incapable of generating electricity. Additionally, the frozen natural gas infrastructure Texas has become so reliant upon has also frozen up. Texas's experience highlights the perils of becoming overly reliant on wind, solar, and natural gas because these energy sources are not as reliable as coal or nuclear power during extreme weather conditions. But there's more to it than that, Hinderaker writes. Texas has what some regard as a free market in energy, but in fact it is distorted by the massive federal subsidies paid by the federal government. These subsidies often cause the price of gas to go, or of electricity to go negative. That is, wind farms will actually pay utilities to take electricity off their hands. The resulting market dislocation devastates reliable energy sources. Federal subsidies for wind pay wind turbine owners $24 per megawatt power for electricity, regardless of whether the electricity is needed or not. These subsidies allow wind operators to make money even if electricity prices turn negative. That means some power plant operators need to pay customers money if they continue to supply electricity to the grid when the prices are negative, while wind generators will make money courtesy of our tax dollars. Yep. The tax subsidy, Europe has had this problem before where power companies nearly went bankrupt because they were having to pay for solar and wind to other companies, and they didn't have enough money for line maintenance. In California, one of the problems with the wildfires out there is the line maintenance issue. It's crazy. All right, to the phones we go now. Andrew waiting patiently in Athens. Welcome. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Something you said earlier really resonated with me, and I thought it was worthy of mentioning. This morning, I'm traveling to Athens, Georgia, to take part in a vigil for a man that was killed 100 years ago today in a mass lynching outside of Athens. And it just so happens that the man was killed he was suspected of killing my grandfather's first wife. So this is a crime that has long been associated with my family. And so the point I wanted to make is that I'm a lover of history, and I've done a lot of research on this crime. I've done a lot of research on my great-great-grandfather's service in the 65th Georgia Infantry. But the difference is when I do this kind of research on the Civil War and my great-great-grandfather, a lot of people in my family hail me as a hero, as I'm preserving family history. But when I participate in things like this, or I talk about this thing that happened in 1921 with my family, I'm criticized by members of my family. I even had a cousin. Her name, her phrase for me is a nouveau liberal when I do stuff like this. But I don't even know what that means, so the joke is on her. But my point is that when I do things like participate in this vigil today, this does not affect or impact or lessen my whiteness, for lack of a better phrase, than it does when I research my great-great-grandfather's Civil War record, because it's history either way, and I can't just take the good and ignore the bad, because when I look at the bad, I'm not doing anything more than when I'm looking at the good. I talk about it, I discuss it, I learn about it, and so I think that's one big takeaway. That over the years, it's been a hard lesson for me because I'm a good old boy raised in the rural South, and it's taken a while for that light to go off. But I think that's one takeaway that comes from this kind of thing when you want to address what is bad in history as well as what is good.
Yeah, look, I think that's a fair point, and I've actually, dare I say, I've grown on this point over time, and in large part, I have to say, my position has come more because of the rhetoric I hear a lot of people who should know better, who really just at this point want to incite when I don't think they should, which makes it clear to me in and out of churches that you can't just claim to snap your finger and all the racial problems we in this country have gone away. Concurrent to that, I also think trying to force that change to come quicker than is natural. It's a generational thing in part. We're going to have to deal with that aspect of it. And I think the sides at this point, both sides want to yell at each other instead of actually dealing with it. And in local communities across the country and people doing things like what you're doing, you one person at a time, one neighbor at a time, you begin to move past history. You move into a better place. I'm sorry. Call me naive, but I have a hard time believing that in a country that fought a civil war over slavery and then saw Jim Crow and the civil rights era and the like, I have a hard time believing that everything has been taken care of. Now, I'm sorry, but I also have a very hard time believing that most people are culpable in the 21st century. And I have a hard time believing that the way to fix the problem is to extract from people who were uninvolved some sort of financial reparation or anything like that. Frankly, I think one of the things that we individually need to do is just love our neighbors. And I think when you're having the wholesale society have to engage and repent for things most people around today are not responsible for, it just generates ill will, like Woko Haram canceling people for daring to say maybe we should extend grace to others. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We got news today. David Perdue intends to possibly run for office. Now, I talked to some of the folks around David Perdue, people who are close to him and know his thinking. I did not talk to him directly. And they say that it's not a sure thing, but it is a most probable thing. Essentially, he's surveying the landscape, thinks this is what he wants to do, and he will let us all know when he's made his decision. Here's my thinking on this. I think he should probably go forth and do this. Now, why? My thinking is that we have got to find someone who can unite the base of the party and also not alienate suburban voters. You may not be aware of this, but David Perdue, his claim to fame is that he got more votes than any Republican ever in the state of Georgia. As David Perdue considers running against Raphael Warnock, I think it is very important to note that fact. It gets ignored, overshadowed, forgotten, is not known. David Perdue got more votes than any Republican ever on the ballot in the state of Georgia. He lost to Jon Ossoff by 52,000 votes, in large part because Republicans did not show up. Some of those Republicans, though, did not show up, and I would venture to guess more than 50,000 of them. They didn't show up because they thought Perdue really wasn't his own man. He was too tied to Donald Trump. And I think that's super relevant because one of the mistakes I think, and I said so at the time, that Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue made was they focused too much on the bad the other side would bring and not enough on the good that their own side brought. I mentioned this in the last hour. You've got to campaign on what you're going to do, not just on how terrible the other people are. You can campaign on we need to hold Joe Biden accountable. We need to we need to make sure that people are taken care of in Georgia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can totally do that. And I think they would be wise to do that. But also, I do think that we need to be mindful of the fact that they've got to be their own people as well. They've got to be their own person. And if they can do that, I think that whoever runs gets elected. Now, I said yesterday, the ad on the SK Innovation stuff. SK Innovations is the company making batteries in Jackson County, northeast of Atlanta. The U.S. International Trade Commission has stopped them from doing so in a trade dispute with LG. President Biden can overrule that. If Warnock and Ossoff don't get engaged in this and the Biden administration upholds this, there's an issue for Perdue right there. And I said yesterday, the ad writes itself, and I used David Perdue as the example. I did not know at the time he was thinking of doing this. I assumed he would not, and I've said so in the last week. I didn't know that he would run again. The issue is what happens with Kelly Loeffler. Does Kelly Loeffler run? Let me say this. I like Kelly Loeffler. I actually do like Kelly Loeffler, and my big regret on her behalf in 2020 is that she ran as close as she could to Donald Trump, in large part to minimize an impact that Doug Collins might have. But in so doing, I think we never really learned who the real Kelly Loeffler is. I've talked to a whole lot of people, and the prevailing consensus from all of them is that Loeffler is a conservative, a pro-life conservative, but that she ran so much in the shadow of Donald Trump, we don't really know her. She came across as stiff on the campaign trail, every word guarded. She didn't want to make a misstep. She didn't want to ever deviate from Donald Trump. Everything she did was about Donald Trump. It put her, I think, in an unfortunate position. And in so doing, I think it minimized who Kelly Loeffler, actually is. And that, I think, is problematic, just in the fact that I think that she's more than what she let on. And I think that essentially the sum of all her parts is greater than what she was able to show on the campaign trail, in large part because she had the Doug Collins issue. And I do think if Doug Collins were to try to run, and I think Collins would be good, but I also think that you would probably see some level of vengeance when it comes to Collins. There would be some level of desired payback when it comes to Doug Collins, because there are a lot of Republicans who will say, well, had Kemp picked Collins, this would have never happened, and that's true. But also, there are a lot of people who said it was Kemp's right to pick Loeffler, and Collins didn't have to run, but he couldn't help himself. And there's a ton of data that suggests that had Loeffler not had Collins in that runoff, or in that primary, I guess it was the jungle primary, I should say, she would have won without a runoff. Loeffler would have won without a runoff, I think, without Doug Collins there. Be that as it may, he had the right to run, and he did. And by doing so, Warnock got elected. That'll be an issue if Collins gets in. I don't know that he will. Maybe he will. My suspicion is he's not going to be happy outside of politics, and there's got to be a role for Doug Collins somewhere. I mean, really, there's got to be. Doug Collins is a good guy. I just kind of think that David Perdue probably has a compelling way to run if this is the big one. If David Perdue runs as David Perdue. If you look in 2014, when David Perdue ran the first time, it was very much a nuts and bolts campaign of, I'm a businessman, we got problems in Washington, let me go fix them. And his 2020 campaign was, the socialists are among us, we need to stop the socialists. But what about David Perdue? There's got to be more to it than that. If he can find that message, and by the way, that there are lots of people behind the scenes of the Republican Party who say David Perdue was his own worst enemy. Maybe so. There was the instance of him taking the cell phone away from the kid. Perdue does not like the campaign trail, from what I've heard. I don't know for sure, but there are a lot of people who say he just doesn't like the campaign trail. I don't blame him. People are stupid, and David Perdue is a smart guy. If I had to be out there on the campaign trail all the time dealing with stupid people, I would be frustrated too. But that's the life he chose. That is the life he chose. David Perdue, if he wants to be in politics, he's got to be a grassroots retail salesman politician. At least maybe he and Sonny Perdue can barnstorm the state together. That would be fun. Have the Perdue team out there, the Perdue cousins all over the state of Georgia. That would be fun. Together, they're kind of a comedy duo, the two of them, when they get out there together. I think it would be interesting. Also, I think that if you had David Perdue out there, you wouldn't have the Kemp Collins antagonism. David Perdue would make a better partner running with Brian Kemp in 2022 than Collins would, given the antipathy between those sides. Maybe someone else will step up and run, but I like the idea of David Perdue running again. There will be some who say, well, he lost. That's true. David Perdue did lose. But why did David Perdue lose? David Perdue didn't lose because he took a camera phone away from someone. David Perdue did not lose because he didn't show up for a debate with Jon Ossoff, who gave him the "how dare you, old man" deal, and David Perdue didn't handle it badly and gave media buzz. Nobody cared about that stuff. Nobody cared about that stuff. David Perdue lost because David Schaefer and Brian and Donald Trump campaigned around the state saying that it was stolen and the Democrats were going to steal it again if Brian Kemp didn't do something. And the result was a whole bunch of people decided that there was no point in going to vote. And so you had 400,000+ Republicans sit on the sidelines, handing Jon Ossoff a victory of barely 52,000 votes. Perdue can win this thing. He can also unite the GOP. The suburban non-Trump Republicans voted for Perdue over Trump. Perdue got more votes than any Republican ever on the ballot in Georgia. Suburban voters actually came back to him by 6 points in the runoff compared to the general. They liked the guy. If David Perdue runs as David Perdue, not as Donald Trump's best friend, I think David Perdue wins in 2022. I think that Warnock is going to be in a very difficult place as the Democrats continue to radicalize. The Republicans, Mitch McConnell very shrewdly, will force Warnock into difficult votes. For example, Tom Cotton has already thrown a vote out there about packing the Supreme Court, and Warnock voted in favor of packing the Supreme Court. He's now on record on that issue. Warnock is also in favor of impeaching Donald Trump. That will inspire people from the president's side to actually turn out and vote for vengeance. The president will push them to do that. And Raphael Warnock is not a businessman, and we are probably headed into a recession. And David Perdue has a businessman's head on his shoulders. He's able to talk about those issues. I think he should do it. I've reached out to his team and said I think he should do it. Listen, other people may stand up and I may say, oh, this is a good guy too. Yes, Kelly Loeffler may want to do it, and if she does, God bless her. I personally, let me address this real quick. If I could advise Kelly Loeffler, I would tell her she should not run this time. Kelly Loeffler needs to spend the next 6 years defining Kelly Loeffler and letting Georgians know who she is. If I were Kelly Loeffler, I would use her money to support one of the conservative think tanks in Georgia, be chair of one of these conservative groups in Georgia, and use her time and energy and wealth to build up a shadow Republican Party in the state, tour the state, connect with Republican voters while building up this group, use her resources to do it, and then when the time comes, run. That will be in 6 years against Jon Ossoff. Kelly Loeffler can run against Ossoff in 6 years, having spent the 6 years building up a core base of support with an outside group, a conservative nonprofit that advances conservative ideals in the legislature. She can pick fights with the Republican establishment. There's no love lost between her and David Ralston. She can make that an issue. And then in 6 years, she can run. She'll have claimed a few scalps along the way. She'll have made a few more enemies along the way, but she'll have defined herself as her own person and not as a Donald Trump puppet, which unfortunately I think her campaign felt the need to do because of running against Doug Collins. They did it well. They beat Doug Collins in the jungle primary, but then in the runoff, they could not pivot to Kelly Loeffler because Loeffler was so bound to Trump. They couldn't alienate Trump voters at the time. She had no base of her own. She needed the Trump voters, and that was to her detriment when the Trump voters decided that they only want to turn out and vote for Trump. So she lost. You build up Kelly Loeffler as Kelly Loeffler over the next several years. I think given her wealth, given her background, given her depth of knowledge on stuff, you let Kelly be Kelly, I think she becomes an unstoppable force in 6 years. But she's got to do that. I don't think she can pivot and run now against Raphael Warnock, again, having just lost to him, and try to be anything other than another second coming of Donald Trump. She's got to have time to be Kelly Loeffler. And I think if the voters of Georgia see that Kelly Loeffler, they'll say, you know what, I like this woman. Let's send her to the Senate. In fact, when you see her and the depth of her knowledge and her experience and her business acumen against Jon Ossoff come 6 years from now, yeah, I totally think she can beat him. But she's got to build up Kelly Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler's got to define Kelly Loeffler as Kelly Loeffler, not as the woman Brian Kemp picked who liked Donald Trump. And she's smart enough to be able to do that. I think she will be more authentic on the campaign trail if she runs as that. And she will have 6 years to build her own base and not have to rely on the president's base, so she can mobilize her own voters and not just the president's voters to turn out for her. I think she should consider doing that. Let Perdue go this time, and I think Kelly Loeffler should come back in 6 years. I don't think she should be done with politics. I don't think Loeffler should stay on the sidelines permanently. I don't think she should just be the voice behind the scenes people go and pay homage to as a former senator and then get her to write a check. I think she's got a role to play substantively in politics in Georgia, building the state as a conservative hub for the next generation. Put her money where her mouth is, engage on that front, and then in 6 years say, look what I've done. You now know who I am, myself. You know that I really do believe these things. I've got a real record to show for it. Now put me back in the Senate. I think if she does that, she barnstorms her way back into the Senate against John Ossoff in 6 years.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend.
It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, is, what is it? 877. I'm a professional, folks. I'm a professional. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me. The phone number, you've got it. I'm sorry, I'm getting an email from a friend of mine that I'm trying to read while I start the show back from commercial. Very unprofessional of me. I apologize. I will move on, and that person can stop emailing me. All right. I gotta play some audio for you. This is from Fox News, Dr. Grace, who was on with Laura Ingraham. I want to play this audio. Listen.
Not really. There's only reports to try and make you more dependent on politicians. Basically, the death rate is going down all over the world. There are a number of reasons for that. By the way, this is a disease that entirely affects those people who have low vitamin D levels. Those who have normal or high vitamin D levels are totally unaffected by this disease. They basically don't even know they had the disease. Most of the people that I know who are taking vitamin D and get the disease say they would much rather have COVID than a common cold because the side effects from the disease is so little when you're on vitamin D and zinc. And so the people are now loading themselves up with vitamin D, and the death rate is going down. This is a disease that really affects people above the 35th parallel quite a bit, because we are not having as much sunshine. We don't have as much exposure to the outdoors anymore because we're all on our screens and in our homes during the winter months. But let me tell you, if you take vitamin D, this disease is nothing.
If you take vitamin D, you know, I'm hearing more and more from doctors that zinc and vitamin D and vitamin C, really zinc and vitamin D, boost your ability to fight this disease a lot. People who are out in the sun, getting natural vitamin D and the like, they're having a really easier time than the rest of us battling it. Which I've been taking zinc since last year, and I've boosted my vitamin C and my vitamin D. My doctor has pushed me to do so, and it seems to work. Here's the thing. They were saying this last year too, and the media denounced it because it might have helped Donald Trump if people knew. There will never be an accounting for this, and I know this will get me lit on fire for saying it. But I really, truly want to know how many people will probably have died because information was withheld so that it didn't possibly help Donald Trump. You know, I say that as someone who not really a huge fan of the guy. I mean, if you're a listener, you kind of know it. But I still also recognize the fact that much of the media shapes stories so that he couldn't get the possible benefit of the doubt. And I think the sooner we are all mindful of that, the sooner we can understand what's true and what's not. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan in Noonan, the Frost family. They've been doing this since 93. They want to help businesses become big businesses. If you are anywhere in the nation responsible for the finances of a business, they don't help individuals, they help businesses. Anywhere in the nation, they will help you, or at least they want to help you, and you can spend 5 minutes with them. Go to firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com, and they will spend 5 minutes with them, see if they're a fit. We're talking six-figure deals here, though, not small change. So they want to help, but if you're a good fit, they want to help you get to yes when so many banks are saying no right now in this economy. Go to firstlibertyga.com, and thanks to them for their sponsorship. If you guys want to advertise, if you got a business, you want to get, we are now in every quarter of the state. You are more than welcome to reach out to us. Go to ewerickson.com. There's a contact form there at the bottom. There's a phone number. There's an email address, all that. And you can reach out to our ad sales team. We are happy to build a relationship with you on the ground floor as we start to really grow this thing. Now, let's go to the phones. Dale is calling. Dale, welcome to the program. How are you? Dale, you there? Well, Dale had been there, and now I don't know where Dale is. I don't know. Dale, you can call back. You're more than welcome to call back. Now, let us move on while Dale decides if he's going to call back or not. Linwood. That's what I want to talk about. Maybe I don't. yes, I do. This is bizarre. So y'all know who Linwood is. Linwood, well, let me just read you the story here. Atlanta attorney Linwood took to social media Saturday with a dramatic plea. I need the help of we the people. Wood, famous first as a defamation lawyer and now as a proselyte of former President Donald Trump, unfounded claims of election fraud, has received a nearly 1,700-page document from the State Bar of Georgia that threatens to end his 43-year legal career. In it, the bar's disciplinary board said it had initiated a grievance against Wood over his conduct in connection with the 2020 presidential election. On the internet messaging service Telegram, Wood enlisted an army of patriots to investigate his accusers, to scrutinize their social media posts, their political affiliations, their connections, and clients, anything that would challenge their competence, qualifications, or objections. He posted the names of the disciplinary board's 18 members and their addresses. For at least 4 board members, he provided his followers home addresses. More than 350,000 Telegram users viewed Wood's post, and within hours, his army was reporting its findings. One post listed intimate facts about a board member: her wedding date, her husband's name, his work as a lawyer, the city where they live. It included rank speculation, works with lobbyists for the state, gives her husband plum appointments, must be recused. The evidence shows that Wood will fight the state bar's disciplinary action with the same tenacity. Yeah, I bet so. Here's the problem. There's just something not right. The state bar asked Wood to go undergo a psychiatric examination after it received 2 complaints about his conduct. Says he never received a formal order. His internist has declared him mentally competent. And I'm sorry, but there's just something not right with, I mean, maybe he's just one of their hundreds of thousands of people who have gone down the bat poop crazy rabbit hole. And he apparently has. I will tell you, however, the State Bar of Georgia is not to be trifled with. As an inactive member of the bar, I keep my bar license. One day, maybe I will let it go. You know, for the longest time, as I was getting into radio, I think my mom is listening right now. For the longest time, when I first got started in doing blogging at Red State and on TV and radio, and I was maybe you need to hold on to it just in case it doesn't work out. Just in case you put in a lot of work to get that bar license, you don't want to let it go. And then I think that the point where my parents were comfortable with me no longer being a lawyer when I started guest hosting for Rush Limbaugh. And then they're like, all right, maybe he'll do something. So, but I still hold on to it. I did put in I'm still paying on my law school loans for my law degree. I just refinanced the last of my law school loans. And so maybe I should hold on to it as an inactive member, but I got to pay the dues every year. It's a shakedown scheme, but you don't trifle with the State Bar of Georgia, or any bar for that matter. I mean, some bars you want to spend time with, but with the State Bar, you don't want to trifle with them, folks. And Linwood has decided to pick a fight, and I don't know that this is a fight he can win. Now, let's see. Can I get Dale? Are you there, or is it on my side?
Hey, brother, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. I'll get right to it. The results of the last two elections, I believe, are the wrath of Stacey. When he was then Secretary of State, Kemp, I'm trying to reform my thoughts after the hold.
No, that's okay.
But she came back like the wrath of Khan. I mean, from hell's heart. I stab at thee.
God!
I mean, and I even include the presidential in that. I mean, she went nationwide, and I have some funny feelings about verifying signatures, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah,
and
look,
that's my thought.
Yeah, listen, Dale. One, I appreciate the Star Trek reference. I totally do. The Wrath of Khan reference is fantastic. Now I'm going to be yelling Khan for the rest of the day, and it's all your fault. But I got to tell you, you're right. A lot of what we saw in 2020 is Stacey Abrams doubled down on 2018. She felt like she had been robbed. And in so robbing her, she decided that she was going to prove everybody that she was actually competent and capable. And, well, we have seen the results. Stacey Abrams, like it or not, she organized and she outperformed the Republicans. And this is kind of one of the things you got to understand here, is that Abrams outperformed Republicans doing what Republicans for years did really well. Now, some of you won't appreciate that, but I'm gonna dig in my heels on this one, because for the very simple reason that Republicans for the longest time actually really did better than the Democrats, particularly here in Georgia, at organizing. And once they got into the majority here in Georgia, they really stopped organizing Georgia. They just kind of took it for granted. Everybody's going to vote Republican. And they're not going to keep voting Republican unless you give them a reason to vote Republican. And the reason to vote Republican is not really the other side is bad or the other side is socialist. Because what do you get from Republicans in Georgia? Oftentimes you get Democrat light. Oftentimes the Republicans in Georgia give you a version of the Democratic Party that is, it's not really anything anybody really wants unless they get all of it. So Republicans give you Diet Coke and Democrats give you Coke. And everybody prefer a Coca-Cola, even the people who drink the Diet Coke. They'd prefer the real thing. They just don't want to get fat. So they don't drink it, but you know they'd really prefer it. And this is a problem. And Republicans in Georgia have got to have a message. And honestly, I mean, look at what's going on right now. Where's the education conversation? There should be a real education conversation in the state legislature in Georgia right now. They're not really having it. They're not really talking about it. They're focused on other things. That's unfortunate, I think, because they got an opportunity to change the narrative to their benefit, that they want schools open. They want poor kids to go to private schools to get good educations if their local schools aren't serving them. And we're just, this isn't in the conversation. It should be in the conversation. It should be out there among the public that, you know, the Democrats are going to keep you and your kids out of school, and we are going to do what we can to get your kids in school. We are going to be there, and we're going to make sure that your kids get a good education, even if that means we got to send your kids to a private school. And the Republicans aren't there. And I wish they would go there, because I think it's a winning issue for the GOP, frankly. I feel very strongly that if the Republicans would pursue this issue, they would find it to be a real winner for them. And they're not. They're not doing it for a variety of reasons. If we're fair to the GOP, I don't know that we want to be fair or that fair to the GOP, but the reality is that all their solution right now is Opportunity Schools, or the Opportunity Scholarship Fund. You as a person can pour some money into the Opportunity Scholarship Fund to offset your state taxes, and poor kids can use that to go to private schools. There should be more than that. And they haven't really had a thoughtful approach. And now one of the things we're dealing with, on top of everything else, is they're looking at the Democrats coming on strong, and they themselves are in the midst of a civil war. The president has done a very good job of dividing Republicans among themselves. President Trump has. Maybe Joe Biden will reunite them. I don't think you can argue at this point that Donald Trump hasn't been a destructive force to Republicans in the state. Now, you may not like me saying it that way, but I don't think you can deny it. I really don't think you can. I think that Joe Biden may be the force that puts the GOP back together, but I think Donald Trump was the force that caused Republicans to start breaking apart and squabbling, very much in the same way that Bill Clinton in the 1990s caused Democrats to break apart. And you saw a lot of Democrats become Republicans. They never really changed their thinking. They just became Republicans to keep getting elected. You will see some Republicans, I think you already have seen some Republicans, become Democrats to try to keep getting elected. I think the GOP's got to push for more ideas. And I think that 2020 was an ideas-less campaign. It was, do you like Donald Trump or not? I think the reason that Donald Trump's supporters could look at the 2020 election and say, oh, look, no one ever showed up for Joe Biden, is because nobody really liked Joe Biden. They didn't care for Joe Biden. They just hated Donald Trump. And I think the sooner Republicans recognize that they need to run some issues, they need to focus on some issues, they need to be all about the issues, I think the GOP starts winning again. Both sides right now. Yeah, David Frum, I mentioned yesterday, David Frum's got that piece in The Atlantic that essentially we need to get rid of the Electoral College now. We need to get rid of the Senate because they're all stopping the majority. It's anti-majoritarianism is a bad thing all of a sudden because they're losing. I would tell the Democrats and Republicans the same thing. Stop saying the system is unfair or stacked against you. Just win some freaking elections. To the extent that the Republicans don't win elections right now, it's because they've internalized that everything's going to be stolen from them. And I think the longer Republicans believe that everything is going to be stolen from them, I think the harder the time is going to be for them to be able to win. And I think the GOP can and will win again if they stop this internalization, this internal nonsense that somehow they are unable to compete because Stacey Abrams has committed some massive amount of vote fraud. Nope. Like Dale said, Stacey Abrams, we're dealing with the wrath of Stacey. Stacey Abrams got beat in 2018. It was a matter of pride for her, and so she doubled down in 2020. She outperformed the GOP expectations. Many of them were dismissive of her, and she proved herself capable and competent of running a grassroots campaign in the way the Republicans used to run in Georgia, and outmaneuvered them, outperformed them. And the sooner that Republicans recognize that she just actually beat them fair and square by outperforming them, the sooner they'll be able to get back in the game here in Georgia. And they better do it soon, because she's coming in 2022. And if they don't get their head in the game, Republicans are going to lose to Stacey Abrams, and she'll be governor for 4 years or longer. God help us if that happens.
You can follow Erick around social media.
Hello there, it's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We got to talk about the water boys. We've got to talk about the water boys. If you're a longtime listener to this program, you know about the water boys. You, in your neck of the woods, have not experienced the water boys. I have experienced the water boys. It is a phenomenon of the metropolitan Atlanta area inside the perimeter. So my evening show, WSB Radio, it's on 17th Street in Atlanta, right where Buckhead and Midtown meet, right off I-75, the connector through the heart of the city. And when I get off at 17th Street in Atlanta, and I make a right-hand turn, and there's, I guess the first one is Spring Street. And there are inevitably boys in the median, in the middle of the road, with water bottles. They have harassed passerbyers. They've blocked traffic. They themselves have been harassed by others. It's a very weird setup. Now listen to this. After a year that brought more attention to the young men known as Atlanta's water boys, the city is studying whether it should start its own water bottling and distribution business that could employ some of the teens. The Atlanta City Council on Monday passed a resolution that tasks the city with conducting a feasibility study on whether it should launch the new venture. Specifically, the city is considering starting a municipal enterprise, a business owned by a local government that generates revenue for local communities. The resolution states that the program could provide job opportunities for what the council called the city's young water vendors, mostly African-American young men, commonly referred to as the water boys, selling water at street corners and on exit ramps throughout 2020. The enterprise could also generate funds to support low-income communities in Atlanta. Last summer, Atlanta police and city officials announced they were cracking down on the teens selling bottled water, following a spike in shootings and arrests stemming from disputes between young people and drivers. Selling water at intersections is illegal. Though Keisha Lance Bottoms admires their entrepreneurial spirit, her order creates an advisory council tasked with coming up with strategies to help promote youth entrepreneurship in the city. My silence is because I'm trying not to use a bad word on radio. What the heck is this? We've got a criminal. Okay, I've got a brilliant idea for the city of Atlanta. This is genius. I cannot believe they haven't thought. The city of Atlanta should go into drug dealing. The city of Atlanta should be your local marijuana dealer. Maybe meth too on the side. I mean, you could bake the meth in City Hall. They got fire extinguishers there. But the city of Atlanta should be. What do you call the person who supplies you your marijuana? I can't remember the vernacular, but they should be your dealer. They should be your drug dealer. It is illegal to sell water at intersections, and a lot of young black men in Atlanta are doing it. Well, guess what? A lot of young black men in Atlanta are doing other than selling water. Another illegal activity. They should do that too. The city should. This is bat poop crazy. A group of young people are in medians along the interstate and on major highways harassing people to buy water. And by the way, here's the thing that's left unsaid in all this. Where are they getting the water bottles from? Where are they? It is not young men going off to Sam's to pick up bottles of water. They are having water supplied. Where is that water being supplied from? Who is doing it? Who is in charge of this operation? None of these questions are being answered by the city. They just decide, hey, they're making money at it. And of course, you know what's going to happen is the city would run it into the ground and then keep subsidizing it with taxpayer money, because that's what cities do. As opposed to just cracking down on people breaking the law. How hard is it to actually enforce the law in the city of Atlanta? It's turning into a just craptacular place to live. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. Sorry, I'm doing a bit of graphic design during the commercial break. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Very happy to have you with me here today if you would like to be a part of the program. And if you don't, well, that's fine. You can hang out and listen. I'll allow it. We got a lot to talk about, and I want to begin if you'll, well, I started to say if you'll allow, but you know what? I don't care if you'll allow it or not. It's my show. I want to talk about the virus for a minute. And I'm at this point always hesitant to talk about the virus because, in part, people are kind of burnt out on the topic, and I am too. And so I'm hesitant to try the patience of my audience in talking about a subject that I think virtually all of us were convinced was going to be gone. And it hasn't been gone. We continue to have to talk about this. And it kind of drives me crazy, frankly, because I'm ready to be done with it. I'm ready to move on. It's kind of weird that in the last number of years, how many topics have we talked about that just disappeared? So many topics that we talked about just poof, they're gone. The Soleimani, the Iranians, the North Koreans, so many of the problems of the summer and the like, they just gone. And this has lingered for a year, and it is an emotionally exhausting topic. I was talking about it this time last year, and I remember this time last year, I was telling you we were starting to get a couple of cases in Georgia, and I was giving you the daily rundown of counties. We got 10 in this county. We got 5 in this county. We got none in this county. We got 500 in this county. We got 100 in this county. And finally, at one point, Charlie's like, you know what? I think we can stop doing this now. People get the point. And it was time to move on. And for a while, we just stopped talking about it. But there's good news today. And we should talk about the good news. This is the headline in the Washington Post right now. The United States 7-day average of daily new cases drops below 90,000 for the first time since early November. Newly reported coronavirus infections in the United States continues their steep drop, with about 56,000 new cases reported Monday, though the figure may be artificially low due to the holiday. However, the 7-day average, considered a more reliable measure, has dipped below 90,000 a day for the first time since early November. Scientists are split about the reason for the drop, citing increased vaccinations, decreased testing, improved social distance habits, and the seasonal patterns for these kinds of viruses. Meanwhile, cases of the more contagious variant first identified in Britain are rising. Only 293 cases were reported in late January. By February 4th, there were 611 and now 1,168. That's good news. That's genuinely good news. And that's news that we can use. It should be encouraging. One of the things that I think is notable, and let me go back to this story from the other day in the Washington Post. 4 reasons experts say coronavirus cases are dropping in the United States. In recent weeks, U.S. COVID cases, coronavirus case data, long a closely watched barometer of the pandemic severity, has sent some encouraging signals. The rate of newly recorded infections is plummeting from coast to coast, and the worst surge yet is finally relenting, but scientists are split on why. Some are pointing to vaccines. Some say it's because of the natural seasonal ebb of respiratory viruses. Others say it's social distancing, and every explanation is appended with caveats. The country's still in a bad place, and recent progress could still be imperiled. A former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention endorsed the idea that Americans are now seeing the effects of their good behavior, not of increased vaccinations. That's Tom Frieden. However, Frieden noted the country's numbers are still higher than they were during the spring and summer virus waves. We're nowhere near out of the woods. this seems to be a global trend. And it's a global trend with different habits and different behaviors. And that suggests there's something going on beyond just social distancing, as some countries are and some countries aren't, and many people are taking responsibility themselves. We haven't reached a vaccination rate yet where we have any sort of herd immunity in the country. No one really has an explanation for this. I would guess it's a combination of all of the above, that there are viral burn rate is different than we thought. The American public is distancing itself better than expected. Vaccinations are increasing across the country. All of the above plays a role in this. People are taking it seriously in ways they haven't in a long time. We've got this interesting data from the Centers for, or from the Georgia Department of Public Health. The COVID data is actually very intriguing right now in the state. We are now where we were back in November, even here in the state. The graphs and data show that the state is doing way better than was expected. There are very few hot spots left in the state. Clayton County is one, Walker County is one, and then the two worst are Chattahoochee County and Stewart County. But even those cases in Stewart and Chattahoochee County are small. 78 cases in Stewart County, 158 cases in Chattahoochee County. But the reason that they're so significant is because those counties are rural. They don't have a lot of people. So it puts them very, very high in the per capita case count, population-wise. But for example, I'm in Bibb County, and there were 532 cases in the last 2 weeks. That puts our case count per 100,000 at 350, which is actually very good. And then you move to Crawford County, which is a rural county next to Bibb County, and the cases per 100,000 is 188. And Monroe County, 370. North of me, Twiggs County, 223. Houston County, 260. Up in Floyd County, it's 401. Up in Habersham County, it's 306. Right up in the northern part of the state is some of the worst. You got Dade County is 464. This is per 100,000. Walker is 698. Catoosa is 509. Whitfield is 432. Murray is 514. And then you get into Fanning and it starts going down. 342 and Union Towns, Raymond County, they're all doing very well. You get down to Emmanuel County, you're talking 137 per 100,000. And you get down to Eccles County and you're talking no cases. 5 total cases in the last 2 weeks. You know, it too is a rural county. But the trend lines in Georgia are going very well. The trend lines nationwide are going very well. And we should focus on the virus for just a few minutes here, just to note that the trend lines are going well. I'm looking at, let me do cases overall for the state of Georgia. And in the date of reporting, the number of confirmed cases is 1,736 as of yesterday. You want any comparable? That's you got to go back to November 30th. Same with the 7-day moving average. You've got to go back to November 30th to find anything comparable to this. We continue to make gains. Our daily totals now are less than at the height of the summer surge. The post-Christmas surge, the post-Thanksgiving surge, put us in record territory, way higher than the summer. But it's all coming back down again. And schools have reopened by and large in the state. There are over 80% of schools in the state are open. People are going back to offices now. Offices are slowly reopening. And still there's this constant meltdown. And I don't think that there should be. Things are going well. And we should be mindful of the fact that things are going well. And we should be mindful of the fact that in Georgia, despite a national freakout of Brian Kemp reopening the state, he's actually done a very good job. Things have not been perfect, and there are some people who are demanding perfection for Brian Kemp who would not be demanding perfection if Stacey Abrams were around. I can tell you this, though. We know for certain, based on patterns of behavior, past statements, and what other governors are doing, if Stacey Abrams were governor of Georgia right now, the state would be in lockdown like all these left-wing states. If Stacey Abrams were governor right now, the state of Georgia would be suffering economically like so many of the blue states. That enough should be an indication that Brian Kemp deserves re-election. Compare him to Andrew Cuomo. Here's Jake Tapper yesterday on CNN talking about Andrew Cuomo.
We just saw a small but respectable number of politicians willing to break with their partisan allegiances and criticize an intimidating leader in the face of loss of life. I'm not talking about the 7 Senate Republicans who voted to convict Donald Trump, Senators Burr, Cassidy, Collins, Murkowski, Romney, Sass, and Toomey. I'm talking about the small number of Democratic officials in New York publicly expressing outrage after the latest development in the scandal surrounding New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and the numbers of New York nursing home residents who were fatally infected with COVID. You may recall the Cuomo administration last March told nursing homes, quote, "No resident shall be denied readmission or admission to the nursing home solely based on a confirmed or suspected diagnosis of COVID-19, unquote." Nursing homes took in thousands of seniors with COVID, potentially infecting thousands more, such as 89-year-old Norman Arbini. After the Cuomo directive, his family pulled him out of a nursing home after he already had gotten a fever, and Arbini died at home from COVID. Now, did he get COVID because of Cuomo's directive? We don't know for sure, but his family says it's not rocket science.
That was Jake Tapper. And now listen to Andrew Cuomo. He was asked about taking responsibility. If you will recall, Andrew Cuomo engaged in a cover-up. His own staff admitted that they withheld data because they were afraid that Donald Trump and the Trump Justice Department would come after him. They admitted to the cover-up. And now listen to him.
We should not have created the void. We should have done a better job in providing information. We should have done a better job of knocking down the disinformation. You'd never knock down all these conspiracy theories, the political conspiracy theories, because they generate 10 a day. But we should have done a better job of providing as much information as we could, as quickly as we could. And we should have done a better job on that. Yes. And no excuses. I accept responsibility for that. I am in charge. I take responsibility. We should have provided more information faster. We were too focused on doing the job and addressing the crisis of the moment, and we did not do a good enough job in providing information. I take total responsibility for that.
Well, I take total responsibility for not providing enough information, but no responsibility for sending seniors back to nursing homes. And that's what has people mad. The fact that he refuses to even acknowledge it, that he wants to dance around an apology. I'm sorry, I was so focused on doing my job of killing senior citizens that I couldn't keep everybody informed and admit I was killing. This is, and it stands in stark contrast to the media coverage of Ron DeSantis, who literally on the exact same day that Andrew Cuomo decided to start sending infected senior citizens back to nursing homes, Ron DeSantis was telling people, you're not allowed to send infected senior citizens to nursing homes. You got to put them somewhere else in a quarantine until they're better. And the result is that Florida, which has a larger population than New York, has per capita done better than New York, but the media had to attack DeSantis because he is a Trumpist, according to the media. And Andrew Cuomo was pure as the driven snow and could essentially engage in the extermination of old people. Hey, at least he's cutting his Medicaid costs. Here's Ron DeSantis.
So the heads they win, tails Floridians lose relationship with big tech.
He's taking on big tech now. He's taking on other big issues moving beyond COVID. Why? Because he's no longer bogged down in the COVID situation because Florida competently was able to manage it. I want to actually talk about this Ron DeSantis pivot to big tech when we come back, because this is going to be a fight we got to pay attention to.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to go back to the Texas situation. You're here in the first hour. One of the things that has happened in Texas is they got so many wind turbines in Texas now to offset the nuclear, the coal, and the natural gas. The wind turbines have frozen. They hadn't been able to get solar panels online until today. It's finally the sun's coming out in parts of Texas so they can get the solar panels back on the grid. But they were useless in the snow. The wind turbines froze, so they were useless. So you got to rely on natural gas, coal, and nuclear power. Well, I'm looking on Twitter, and there's actually an energy analyst says it's worse than what people think. It's not just the wind turbines. The coal stacks froze. the coal stacks froze. The piles of coal that they use to keep the coal-powered plants burning, they froze. They couldn't get the coal into the furnaces because the coal stacks were frozen. And the natural gas pipes froze. The natural gas pipes froze, so the natural gas wouldn't flow. And then the overloads tripped the nuclear power plants in Texas, and they got kicked off the grid. In other words, it was the nightmare scenario. It wasn't just the wind turbines in Texas. It was everything. The wind turbines caused them to have to rely on the coal plants. The coal plants couldn't produce the power because the piles of coal were frozen solid. The natural gas pipelines froze, so they couldn't get the natural gas in. And then the overload of demand caused the nuclear power plants to trip offline. Everything went wrong. And this energy analyst and professor notes that in the Texas energy, ERCOT, they call it. What exactly is, I forget what ERCOT stands for. It's Texas's Essential Energy Reliability Council of Texas. Manages the flow of power on Texas's grid, and this winter storm surpassed the nightmare scenario. And in the nightmare scenario, all of Texas has been shut down. Holy moly. That's just amazing. And the governor and the legislature in Texas are going to have to delve into exactly what went wrong, and there's going to be hell to pay with voters. Although, I say that, but if you go back to the lesson learned in Georgia, when was it? In 2014, 2015, we had the massive story. It was 2014, yes, because it was Nathan Deal's re-election year. And Georgia was frozen over. All those people stuck for hours, if not a day, on the interstate in Atlanta, unable to get home in the snow, people abandoning their cars. I was on radio for 14 hours straight. And this is it. The governor, he's toast. Not going to get reelected. Nathan Deal got reelected. Now, Greg Abbott is, I guess they don't have term limits for governor in Texas, so he could run again. I don't know whether he will or not. But voters react badly when they freeze to death in their homes. And I've got friends of mine who are stuck, and it's like 1 degree, literally like 1 degree. And they're stuck in their house, and they have no heat. A buddy of mine said it got below freezing in his house. They were having to run the water pipes at full blast to make sure that their water pipes didn't burst. And man, it's a mess out there. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I need to say something somewhat impolite. Let me read you first this story from the AJC. I wasn't going to go here, but they just put the story up. Georgia leaders grapple with the growing demand to expand COVID-19 vaccine eligibility while addressing vaccine hesitancy among workers in the state's poultry industry. Meeting with Hispanic business and community leaders in Gainesville, Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp said that vaccine shipments from the federal government will remain at the current levels of about 154,000 doses a week for the next few weeks. That will limit the state's ability to expand the list of groups eligible to get vaccinated. Still, pressure has mounted on Kemp in recent days to expand eligibility to frontline essential workers such as grocery store and public transit employees and teachers. Vaccinations are currently limited to Georgians 65 and older, health care and long-term care workers, police officers, firefighters, and paramedics. I understand the desire to get everyone vaccinated. I mean, honestly, goodness gracious, when I got the opportunity, I jumped at the chance to get the vaccine. I was in the grocery store and there was an extra dose and there was no one there to take. I took it. So I understand, and maybe there will be some who say I can't talk about this because I got the vaccine. But I will tell you, the fact of the matter is that if you're 65 and older, you have a massively higher rate of death than anyone else. Do you know you've got a massively higher rate of death than even people who have, for example, lung cancer, with the exception of certain types of lung cancer? Like my wife has a genetic type of lung cancer that actually puts her in a class of people with a higher mortality rate than people 65 and older. But the federal government has not distinguished between types of cancer. So I was glad my wife was able to go on and get her shot, given her mortality rates. But they're essentially assigning, with the exception of the police, fire, and paramedics, they're putting the list based on rate of mortality. If you're a 45-year-old school teacher, your chance of dying from COVID is far less than the 65-year-old. So while I understand the desire of many to get the vaccine, and I wish we did do a first come, first serve, but let seniors jump the line style, we're not. And we're doing it in an approach governed by federal guidelines that say the people with the greatest chance of dying are the people who should get it first, and that's senior citizens. And I think that everyone has a lobby, everyone has a constituency, everyone has a desire to have their side get taken care of. And I totally get that. I totally get it. But I got to tell you, it seems to me that one of the things we got to be mindful of is senior citizens die quicker, more frequently than anyone else who gets this virus. And so I think the governor is making a deeply unpopular choice, but it's also the right choice. The governor's saying we got to get senior citizens first, and everyone else is going to have to wait unless you're in a situation where there's a spare dose. They don't want it thrown away. You can take it. Call your pharmacy. You can get on a list. A lot of pharmacists, particularly individual small shop pharmacies, not chains, they're taking lists of people. If they've got a spare dose, they will call you and get you. If you can come within the next hour, get it. They're doing that. I know a lot of pharmacists are doing this. Call your local pharmacy and just talk to them and say, listen, I'm not a senior citizen, but I've got a issue that elevates my mortality with this virus. If you have a spare dose, are you doing a will call list? Because they're taking reservations from people. You get to the end of the day, you've got a dose. You didn't think your vial was going to have that dose, but it does. You don't want to throw it away, so let's do a must call. I'll call you. If you answer, come. If you don't answer, well, I'm moving to the next person. Kathleen Toomey has said do that. The governor has said do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But prioritize senior citizens. I got to tell you. Yeah, so there's only one time that the governor of the state of Georgia has ever cussed me. There's only one time the governor of the state of Georgia has ever used profanity in my direction. And it is where I was joking, said, "Don't you want to run for president?" No, I can assure you, the governor of the state of Georgia has no interest. And for all of you, because he's Trump. You know, there are people who are reacting like that right now. But I mean, a year ago, you were all fanboys for the guy. All of y'all who are still upset about the election. A year ago, you were a fanboy, and you can't even admit it, which says a whole lot about you. People were gaga over it. He reopened the state. He defied even the president. He reopened the state. People in Georgia were like, yeah, our guy, he's getting our economy. And you know what? It worked. Our economy's doing better than every other state's economy. And that was it at the time where I suggested that if Trump didn't win re-election, maybe it was something he should consider in 2024. And I was being humorous. I was chuckling when I said it. He was having none of it. He may be the only politician in America, down to dog catcher, who does not see himself ever being president and never has. Never has wanted it, has no desire, none of it. And I say all of that to say he is, now that he's the governor's, this is it for him. He's done with politics after this. And I would not want his job for anything. The number of no-win situations that Brian Kemp has been put in, yeah, look, he wanted the job. You've got to acknowledge he did want the job. But holy moly, it's just crazy to me, the stuff he's had to put up with since he got elected. You got the economic issues, you got the viral issue, you get the election issue, and so much of it, there's nothing he can do. It's not his fault, and yet he gets thrown under the bus. I mean, like, for example, the election stuff, they're literally under Georgia law, not a single thing the governor of the state of Georgia can do, and yet he's the bad guy. It's absurd to me, the number of people who have taken that position, that there's nothing Brian Kemp can do, but he's the bad guy. And Brad Raffensperger. I don't want to belabor the point because I talked about this yesterday, but I'm fascinated by it. I want to move on actually to the minimum wage because this is becoming a national issue. Here's not exactly a genius, but this is Barbara Lee. Listen to this.
Yes, and I think I heard Mr. Richmond say, where there's a will, there is a way. We've faced many hurdles as it relates to moving this forward in terms of the technical aspects of this. But I'm confident, and you see Senator Bernie Sanders and others working very hard with the parliamentarian, trying to find the path forward. Because $15 an hour minimum wage is absolutely essential. We have seen so many more people fall into the ranks of the poor during this horrific pandemic. People deserve $15 minimum wage, and I think that we'll find a way. I'm cautiously optimistic that the parliamentarian and Senator Sanders will figure this out. But believe you me, and I serve as a member of the Progressive Caucus, and I'm so proud of the fact that early on, years ago, the Progressive Caucus came forward calling for an increase in the minimum wage. And so we're working very hard to make sure that we can get it out of the House and over to the Senate.
That talk there about the parliamentarian and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has hired a guy who everyone acknowledges is a master strategist of the rules of the Senate, which are somewhat arcane and difficult to understand. And they are largely preventative of getting something like a minimum wage increase through on reconciliation because it is a policy preference change. Now they can still they can weasel their way into doing it, and I'm sure they're going to try. But you've got Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin and the like saying nope, they're not for that in here. Here's the problem with the minimum wage. There are 50 states in this nation, and we shouldn't have the federal government set a one-size-fits-all wage rate. The fact of the matter is, you can go down to Unadilla, Georgia, or Vienna, or Montezuma, and the cost of living is vastly different than Atlanta. And Atlanta is vastly different from Charlotte, Birmingham, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, which are vastly different in themselves from Des Moines, Bismarck, Lafayette, Louisiana, New Orleans, Baton Rouge. Having the federal government set the wage rate for an entire nation of diverse people and backgrounds and income levels and price disparities and housing markets, it's kind of stupid. It is a very stupid policy. We are the fourth largest country on the planet. In terms of population, we're very near the top. And, I mean, you got China, India, most populous countries. We are, we're number 3. We are number 3. China has 1.39 billion. Indonesia has 1.32 billion. The United States has 329 million. Indonesia has 272 million. Pakistan 233 million. Then Nigeria, then Brazil, then Bangladesh, then Russia, then Mexico. If you add up the European Union doesn't quite have even the most. It doesn't even settle on the United States. It comes close. But it really is an amazing drop-off, though. You get 1.39 billion people in China, 1.32 billion people in India, and then 329 million people in the United States. Huge drop from 1.3 billion to 329 million. We are the third most populous country on the planet. We are the fourth largest country on the planet. We have people spread out over 50 states spanning an entire continent and then some. For a federal government in Washington, D.C. to set a minimum wage rate for all of those people in all those places, given all that diversity and economic diversity, is stupid. The cost of living in one end of the United States is vastly different from the cost of living in another end of the United States. And by the way, I do think it's worth noting that every time we've raised the minimum wage, the income gap has gotten larger. Now, why is that? Well, because some people go unemployed when you raise that rate. It's not going to impact the bajillionaires. It's not going to impact Jeff Bezos. But it's going to impact the mom and pop shop on Main Street. And let's take a look. Let me just pull up my map here. I want to pull up my map. I want to zoom out of Georgia. Let's not pick on our beloved Georgia. Let's get into the Mississippi Delta. Let's go to Indianola, Mississippi. Indianola, Mississippi. It is across US 82 in the Mississippi Delta region. You got Greenwood, Indianola, then you got Greenville. And then you take a windy road and you cross the Mississippi River into Lower Arkansas. And the cost of living in Greenville and Indianola and Moorhead and Itabena and Greenwood and Shaw and Leland and Hollandale, Mississippi, it is a completely different cost of living experience than Alpharetta, Johns Creek, Duluth, Lilburn, Sandy Springs, Tucker, Atlanta. You can arguably actually live on the current minimum wage out there. Not well, mind you, but you can live on it. You can make ends meet in a way that if you're in downtown Johns Creek, north of Atlanta, you probably can't. You can find a place to live in Indianola, Mississippi on your income that you couldn't in Johns Creek unless it was government subsidized. Having a federal government do a one-size-fits-all minimum wage is a terrible idea, and the Democrats are pushing forward with it because the Democrats, they're kind of, as much as they preach and practice and demand diversity, they're kind of ignorant of the diversity of the country. They all live on the coasts or in major urban areas, and they just don't engage at the level that the Republicans and conservatives tend to, because conservatives tend to live out in rural suburban areas, and they commute into urban areas for a lot of jobs and then back, and the left just stays in those areas, and they don't really know or engage with people who don't look and sound like them anymore. A conservative, by and large, is more likely to encounter a liberal than a liberal is to find a conservative. And so they think, oh, well, everybody in the city needs a higher minimum wage. They don't care about farm country. They don't care about ex-urban areas. They don't care about rural areas. And essentially, you increase the minimum wage, you are hurting parts of the country. You know what the real minimum wage is? It's zero. As Thomas Sowell has pointed out, it's zero because a lot of people will lose their jobs. The media likes to gloss over Seattle, for example, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It is hard to find a lot of media criticism of the $15 an hour minimum wage. But if you look, what you'll find in the more honest coverage of it is a lot of people lost benefits. Their wage went up and their insurance went down. Their wage went up, their 401k contribution went down. So people made a little more money, but they lost a lot in exchange. And you don't hear those stories in the media. The $15 an hour minimum wage sounds really good on paper. Who wouldn't want a higher rate? The problem is the practical application of it winds up costing people money, and the media is so far in the tank with the left on this issue, you never, ever hear a fair assessment of it. This is an actual CNN analysis, not an opinion piece, an analysis by John Harwood. No wonder congressional Democrats remain so united behind President Joe Biden's new administration. Quietly but quickly, they are taking major strides towards their shared goal of curbing economic inequality. The $1,400 relief checks in Biden's coronavirus rescue legislation have dominated the headlines. But far less familiar provisions in the giant $1.9 trillion package could have a longer, larger impact on the disparities of income and wealth that have animated Democratic politics for decades. And on it goes. And that's aside from the provision that would more than double the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next 5 years. This is an analysis. This is fanboyism. The media won't cover the fallout of the minimum wage increase. And it's not a good public policy. And you're not going to hear that on your newscast. Unless you're watching Fox, you'll get honest news on this. It's now, for years, the media has now been calling Fox the state-run media. With Donald Trump gone, it's CNN and MSNBC are just propagandists for the Biden administration.
Honest news and conservative views.
there, it is Erick Erickson here. Sometime around 2,000 years ago, after the resurrection, the early Christians felt like, given the persecution of the church, and given the need to understand what it meant to actually be a Christian in a Roman Empire that was hostile to Christianity, there needed to be a 40-day period of training for anyone who wanted to become a member of the church. They had to be raised up in the ways of the church, and so they spent 40 days before Easter teaching that person in the run-up to their baptism and first communion, and they would give it on Easter Sunday in the Roman Empire before it converted to Christianity. And sometimes the people would say, nope, not for me, and would turn away from it. And sometimes those people would go rat out the local church and lead to those people dying, being persecuted. And that 40-day period, well, after the empire converted to Christianity, that they kept it. And they converted it into something where you would give up stuff. You would go into a Lenten period. And today is the last day before Lent. Tomorrow is Ash Wednesday. Today is Mardi Gras. Today, Shrove Tuesday, some would call it. The day before Ash Wednesday. It began on Epiphany, and I never did make my king cake this year. I ordered one, and it wasn't very good. And I should have made one. And today is Mardi Gras. And being from Louisiana, I feel compelled every year to comment on it. But the history of Lent is a history of the early church of what do you do when you're no longer going to die for your faith? Well, you in some way take up a rejection of temptations of the world, and you spend 40 days in meditation on your faith in the run-up to Easter. So Easter will come again this year. We'll do another Good Friday show this year. But today is Mardi Gras, the day that you go out and you have a good time. And, of course, these days in the 20th and late 20th and the 21st century, it's a day for hedonism and debauchery, and unfortunately for a lot of people. But there are no parades in New Orleans this year, sadly, because of the virus. That's kind of disappointing, but maybe life will actually return to normal next year, and there will be grand parades back again on the streets of New Orleans. Happy Mardi Gras.